All right, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing anxiety in children and teens. I think this is an important topic just because it is really common with our kids, whether in foster care or just kids in general. And so it's important to kind of see the signs and know what kind of tools we can utilize to help our kiddos along. So I will start. So again, our agenda is what is anxiety, signs and symptoms in children and teens, the causes of anxiety, types of disorders, how to help a child with anxiety, and when to seek help and treatment. In full disclosure, I really not enjoy this topic. I enjoy this topic, talking about it, but educating people on it because I myself am diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. So it just means that my brain is fairly swamped with multiple tabs open. I've got a lot of things going on. It's not just one thing I worry about, it's multiple things. And I was actually diagnosed with this in 10th grade, but I felt the symptoms back in 5th grade. I felt a lot of anger. And so I knew something was off. And so it took a while for me to finally speak up about it and get the right education and on the right path. And so when I'm talking to kids, I understand where they're coming from. And so that's why I find this topic, really important because again, we're seeing a lot of kiddos that do come in with anxiety, and to understand where it's stemming from is really important. So what is anxiety? So anxiety is often a normal part of childhood and adolescence, but there's a difference between everyday worry and chronic anxiety. So it's important to understand that distinction. So it's really normal to have that. So with this and that, so anxiety disorder, you often have, it often happens out of the blue. It can be persistent, even if there's no real threat. It interferes with your daily life, keeping you from socializing, working, or sleeping. It really kind of, it's kind of like a ball and chain. You can't really move very far. You've got a lot of anxiety about taking a test, but you're overthinking it. Maybe you're thinking that your friends are talking about you or thinking about the relationship you have, and maybe you feel like you're messing it up. So it's kind of really interfering with your ability to socialize, to function day to day. Normal worry is nervousness is tied to a specific cause, such as an upcoming test or work deadline. Having butterflies before you're giving a speech. That's all normal. It's fleeting and usually passes when the challenge is over. And it doesn't interfere with your daily life. This is again just the normal worry that kids may have or we might have as an adult, like getting ready to take our driver's exam. And then after you're done, you're like, I'm done. And that worry just goes away. When you have the anxiety, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to back up into something. I'm going to run something over. What if I don't turn this way right? And even after that test is done, you're still going over that in your head. So that is the difference between the anxiety and the worry. So I'm going to show you a quick clip. I think it gives a good idea of just kind of where kids are and how they kind of would describe anxiety and depression. So hopefully, let me get to my bar to share sound. Can you just give me a thumbs up, Pat?
I feel like one of the most stressful parts of my life so far has been the first semester of 6th grade.
You can feel sad, scared, angry. It's your brain that's sad. That's an anxiety.
Depression, it's not just sadness, it's a lot of things. It's stress and tiredness.
You could be stressed for not really a good reason. You're just overwhelming yourself.
When someone took my toy and then I gave it back, even on Monday.
When my grandma's dog died, I felt sad.
His name was Snaggle. He died at like 15, I think. They had to put him down. We got to pet him a bit. I was pretty upset.
Like you have no energy when you're depressed and you're just like, don't want to do anything.
I make a mad face when I'm mad and angry. My breath gets really fast. My heart beats really fast.
I feel like my stomach starts hurting.
All I want to do is just forget all of this.
Play a game that they wanted to play.
Even if I don't like to play that game.
If it seemed like really serious, I'd like tell them a grown up.
I'll just take a couple deep breaths.
I hugged a stuffed animal.
Squish a pillow like this, but you'd get kind of like a little more mad. I have this special book at home that helps me overcome my anxiety. They call worries bullies. They always say to lock up the worry in an imaginary box. I say cheer up.
Don't get too down on yourself because that's going to make everything worse.
Talk to people, like someone that you can trust, someone that will listen.
Tell somebody because it's not going to get any better if you don't.
She always cuddles with me and she tells me everything's gonna be okay.
Usually like snuggle me and like let us have a family movie night at nighttime. If she like notices I'm like kind of feeling down or something, she'll be like, you can talk to me or your dad or anybody or people like that about anything. My parents, my grandparents, like you can talk to me whenever something's on your mind.
Mostly it's because kids don't tell their parents. They need to keep they need to tell them more about like what's going on in their life so they can know how to help you.
Okay. So I just thought that was a nice little segue, just hearing from kids themselves. So just going over what anxiety impacts, and this impacts several pieces of our lives. So thoughts, emotions, physical health, academics, and social interactions. Again, just the thoughts are often negative. They're very, I would say, persistent. Emotions, anxiety can impact and kind of throw us for a loop and just, we're quick to snap, or we end up going into kind of isolating ourselves. Physical health. I don't know if any of you have kind of experienced it, but when we have kiddos around, they might be talking about headaches or stomach aches. I know growing up that my biggest thing was always having a stomach ache right before school started. And I would just say, nope, can't go today. I don't feel good. My own 14-year-old son, when he was going through some stuff, that would be his go-to, to the point where he would actually make himself get sick. And so we have to take that in consideration. Anxiety definitely impacts academics when you're, overthinking, overly worried about what's going to happen next. Did I do okay? Did I work hard enough? And sometimes anxiety gets to the point where you just kind of shut down. So maybe you're not always, maybe you're not always, participating in classes because you're so anxious. And again, I'm very transparent. As a person with a learning disability, my anxiety would be full blown, especially when it came to math. And so I would get to the point where I would just either zoom through the assignment and of course not have anything right, or I would just completely disregard it and ignore it, which caused me to have poor grades sometimes. And then social interactions. Kids who say I can't, they'll make plans because they want to socialize and then they'll cancel. I was notorious for this with my friends, so they stopped inviting me, which was part of my anxiety is like, they're not going to invite me anywhere. And to the point where I was just telling them I can't go, that they did stop inviting me. And so with kids, it's very similar. So they're so anxious, they're worried that they're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, that they end up just isolating themselves and avoiding those social interactions. And so let me see if I can move this thing down. At each stage of development, kids, they're at different levels. Anxiety is going to hit them and have different abilities. Oops, get this down. Sorry, me scrolly thing. I'm trying to get my taskbar to disappear, but I don't know how to do that. So I just ignore it. So moving on, so the causes of anxiety. So anxiety disorders are most likely caused by a combination of environmental and biological factors. It is often triggered by stressful events, such as an abrupt change in their lives, example, stress from a family situation or a traumatic experience. As we all know, that kiddos in foster care have one of the most traumatic experiences of being removed from their home. And so that definitely is something that would be triggering for our youth. And again, with the environmental and biological factors, we have to take in consideration that maybe this is something that their parents have dealt with. Again, I don't want to always use myself as an example, but my mom, my grandmother, all has struggled with anxiety and depression. And so, again, taking that into consideration, this is something that might be hereditary. And then again, the environmental piece is that, if the child is moving from home to home, there's just not a lot of stability. So a child becomes anxious of what's the next thing that's going to happen. And that can really become, something that causes further issues down the road. Another piece is that parents who are anxious themselves or overprotective of children may also contribute to a child's anxiety. I see this sometimes in foster parents where they do worry a lot because, we don't know exactly what the outcome might be for a youth placement, or, the kind of their future, if it's going to be with us, or is it going to go, are they going to be reunified? Maybe we're anxious about behaviors. And so sometimes if we are projecting that, kiddos are taking that in as well. I've seen that in several cases and in my own life experiences. Just when someone's just overly protective, they're overly worried, kids are sponges and they're noticing it, they're taking it, and then that can cause their own anxiety. Does anyone have questions so far? Okay. So let's just move this. I love the control panel thing here. Symptoms and signs in children. So children or kids are greatly affected by what happens in the world around them. They feel drained and isolated from others, as well as being fearful or having feeling of shame. So difficulty concentrating, as we mentioned, school, you definitely see this. Problems with sleep or nightmares. Maybe they're starting to have night terrors. Maybe they just can't fall asleep. Or you might see on the flip side of the child who's really anxious is that, they could be falling into that depression piece where they're so anxious that they want to just shut down and they sleep. Having tantrums or anger issues. Again, anger is a symptom of anxiety. So when we're having anxiety, we're having, these thoughts, these worries, and it's stressing us out. It is just, we don't know what to do. We're really close to the edge. So sometimes anger is what it can lead to. It could lead to, having an outburst, having a tantrum, running away, breaking something, because we have this ball, kind of like that image in the child's right above their head. We have this ball and it's all twisted and tied up and just, we don't know where to go from here. We're feeling stuck. So being tense or fidgety, I am definitely a fidgeter. And you can see this with some kids where they just are, picking their nails, or they're doodling a lot, or they're, having to play with something because their anxiety is so high that they need to get it out somehow and release it. Frequent periods of crying, because again, there's a lot of weight on a child's shoulders. and complaining often about not feeling well. That's something we just see most common. Again, just the worry about even going to school, or they have a test, or they might see somebody they're not getting along with, and they just, it just makes them have a gut ache. And that's something that we just see often. So, what are teens anxious about? And so we're seeing that they're really anxious about their performance. So whether this is, you know, at school when they're working on a project, or if this is during a sport, how they're doing. Are they doing okay? Do they do the right thing? Or, are they thinking, I could have been better, I could have done this different? Their performance is something they are worried about. Another one is how they are perceived. My friends totally think I'm a nerd, or, I can't wear these, shoes because they're out of style, or I can't wear this brand because no one likes that. I'll be a joke. Um, this is a terrible haircut. I'll never wear that. I remember my son just kind of going through different phases of what he wanted to wear and what he wanted to look like. Multiple kids I've worked with in residential, it was all about the materials, being very materialistic because sometimes it's all they had. And so they wanted people to think that, they had a lot of worth. They had a lot of money because they're wearing the new Nikes or the new Jordans. They have the new style brand. And that is so important, is what they're thinking of how other people are looking at them. And the other piece is their bodies, especially teens. They're going through that puberty stage. Their bodies are changing. Sometimes they're starting to have acne. Sometimes, they're developing. And I think there's a huge pressure on to look a certain way. And sometimes that's based off, social media and what is being presented that way. And just comparing ourselves as well to others that might have a higher social standard, or a social in the social ladder. We're constantly comparing ourselves. And I think even adults, we still do this with sometimes our friends, sometimes based on an image we see in a magazine or on the internet. So that's definitely something that kiddos are kind of looking at. So for teens, the majority of their worries are connected with feeling about themselves. Anxiety in teens is not always apparent because they tend to disguise their thoughts and feelings. So maybe it's the constant fears or worries about routine aspects of their life. Going into school, there's withdrawal. Maybe they're just starting to isolate themselves. Maybe they're no longer doing the activities they enjoyed. Irritability. This was me. I was super snappy, quick to draw. And I think that's where kids are, especially with the youth that we get coming into care, who often have a shield built up already. When something they're perceiving as a threat, that's causing their anxiety. So they're easier to snap. Difficulties in school are sudden poor performance. Again, this is something that's very common. Some of our kids do, have done poorly in school because of maybe a learning disability that hasn't been identified. And so they're just thinking that people are going to think they're dumb. So then they become the class clown, or they act out, or they think that I don't need to do this. I'm not going to do my work because they don't really want anyone to notice that they may be struggling with the work. Refusal to go to school, again, having those stomach aches or headache, sleep difficulties. All those tabs are open. They're thinking about this, they're thinking about that. And as we know, the kids are coming in, they sometimes have, that worry about, is my mom safe tonight? If they're separated from their siblings, are their siblings okay? There's a lot on their shoulders. Substance abuse, they can definitely turn to that. Vaping is a big concern nowadays. And they're kind of just trying to find something that is a distraction, and then constantly seeking reassurance. Sometimes we see this in the relationships they pick. They pick relationships that maybe are not healthy because they just need to feel something, or they just need someone to say, hey, you're doing a good job. And just their friendships. And if they're not getting that, and so they start to kind of doubt themselves, doubt their abilities, doubt the relationships they have with their family and their friends. And so it's just all of these tabs are open in a kiddo's mind. So the most common types of anxiety is the separation anxiety, social anxiety, and generalized anxiety. And then there's disorders that share features with anxiety disorder, such as obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, and adjustment disorder. So how do we help a child? So the first thing we want to do is respond to their anxiety right away. And again, sometimes we don't always notice it because we think, well, you're just saying that because you just don't want to go to school. But there's usually something far deeper going on. So talk about their worries. They may not want to share with you, but maybe they want to share with some other adult or a mentor. Show concern and understanding. We were all kids once. We've all experienced some kind of worry or anxiety in our lives. Be supportive, but not controlling. Don't give them those solutions for everything. We want to have a solution focused, trauma informed lens where we want them to kind of work these problems out themselves, but let them know that, you're going to be here. You're going to be supporting them. You're going to be there to listen. And then helping build that child's coping skills. So whether this means, teaching them deep breathing or having them go to counseling sessions, or just saying, hey, let me just journal about it. There's some great books out there that talk, a kid can do on a daily basis that's talking about how they're feeling in the moment, what went right today, what went wrong today, and just kind of assisting them. And that's all different ages that can be for. Another one is be a positive role model. Try to remain calm and patient as possible when dealing with a problem. I know as a parent, it can be very frustrating when your child's, becoming irritable, or sometimes it leads to being disrespectful because their anxiety is so high. And we don't see it that way. We see it what's happening in the moment, and we're offended. And we want to have a reaction that's maybe like knock it off and kind of going into it in a more negative fashion. But I think it's really important to take a step back and to, again, remain calm and realize maybe there's something deeper going on. And be mindful of the way you speak and what you speak about. As we know, these kids they're thinking about a visit coming up. Maybe they're thinking about their parent, and just it's our responsibility to make sure we're recognizing that and taking a moment to, put ourselves in check and think about the next words that are going to come out of our mouth, because we, want to reassure them that, if this or that happens in the visit, that you're still going to be there. And I think even displaying how we handle our own adult situations, whether it's, the two parents having a discussion. I know that, sometimes my husband and I have, discussions that can be a little bit louder regarding, I don't know, maintenance on a car, because I'm terrible at it. And just being aware that my kids can hear me, and that if this is a conversation that needs to be held in private, it needs to be held in private. And, my son would always tell the dog to shut up. And I said, we can't say that. And as an adult, I have to make sure we don't tell people to shut up, because then my daughter will repeat it. So being that positive role model is so important here. Avoid making negative comments about your own body. This is something that's huge. Again, our kiddos are looking at their bodies, especially when they're going through puberty, and saying, I'm changing here. My voice is changing. My body's changing. There's hair in new places. And so if we as adults are talking negative of ourselves, oh, I could lose a little more pounds here, or, I can't even fit in these jeans, I'm so fat, or, gosh, I just hate the way I look. Again, our kids are picking up on this. I mean, my mom was a yo-yo dieter growing up. So it was really hard for me as an adult to not say the things that she said and repeat them. And now I have two little girls, and I have to be mindful of, they're looking up to me. And I can either shame myself in how I look, or I can go out there feeling confident for them, feeling like I can do this. I can go wear a bathing suit, even though it's not my favorite thing, despite, the post body, baby body, and, be okay with that, because they need to see that. I shouldn't show shame in myself and who I am, because then they'll start to feel shame about who they are. And kids really take that in. Like I said, my mom was a yo-yo dieter. I watched it happen so many times, and it really influenced my thinking. So I have to take a step back before I say something. Helping, so practice relaxation techniques. Offer to do deep breathing or meditation with them. I think this is so great. Yoga, turning off the cell phones or social media to tune into their happy place. I think sometimes just turning off that cell phone, the moment you get back from work and taking an hour or two without that thing stuck to our hands and just being in the moment with our kids is really important. I think the deep breathing, giving them those techniques, because then they can do that at school. Whether a child, can do it in private and go to the bathroom, take some deep breaths, or just learn some tapping methods. That's pretty awesome. Or attend a yoga class together. I found a really great yoga program for little kids, and my daughter does that with me after work sometimes. And it's just a way I'm teaching her how to do a deep breath, which is hilarious for a 2-year-old. But I think these are things that we can share with our youth, share with our kids, and kind of get them involved. And if we're doing it, they're going to want to do it too. Encourage healthy social media use. Set a good example by limiting your own screen time. I think we get so caught up in our day-to-day of checking what's on Facebook, what's in the news, who do I need to message and update? I think if we just remind ourselves, okay, I need to put this thing down and just be in the moment with my kids and creating maybe a family night, doing a movie night. Just, my husband is so guilty of this. We're watching a movie and he's got a screen in front of his face. I'm like, no, like be with us, be present. Encourage in-person socializing. Have those get-togethers and have a kid's friend over. Set aside screen-free time for the whole family. Encourage a child to cut ties with those who positive, negative comments, there we go. And urge them to be responsible when posting. So teaching them what is appropriate to be on social media. If you're having friends that are making negative comments, are they really your friends? Are they really appropriate for your life? Are they bringing anything of substance to your life? And decrease social media use if it's impacting your child's schoolwork, sleep, or involvement with outside activities. If you're starting to see grades drop, if you're starting to see, some, behaviors where they're looking like they're really struggling with managing themselves, then maybe they need a kind of a break from that, because social media is so intoxicating, I would say. They're just enveloped in so much things, like so much information, and conversations. And there's, I think there's a thing that, when we talk about online bullying, where there is kind of that protection where things can just be said freely, and kids don't really realize that there may or may not be a repercussion for it, so they just do it anyways. And I think it's important when we're starting to see that influence our youth, that could be, again, that online bullying, someone's harassing and making negative statements and messages. It's important to be aware, check on those things, and just make sure that it's not having any, social media is not having such a negative impact on our youth. Promote good sleep hygiene, establishing a predictable and relaxing sleep routine. Make sure a child feels safe and comfortable at bedtime with minimal distractions. We know that when kids come into care, it's pretty hard to adjust to a new home, to a new environment. So we want to make sure that we stay predictable and we do keep it relaxing, whether this is using essential oils or making sure there's a night light for the youth, or, if they're younger, let's keep a routine. So maybe we read a book before bed and then we brush our teeth. And not so have so much noise in the background, I think helps a lot. And so again, just checking with a child, what's going to make them feel comfortable, and hopefully that will help them with that nighttime routine. So anxiety and depression, sometimes these really do go hand in hand. An anxious lifestyle can be so distressing or so limiting that it can lead to depression. So they're calling this layering. So an example of anxiety starts to impact everyday decisions and could lead to isolation or withdrawal from activities the person may enjoy. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you can't just have anxiety or you can't just have depression, but what I'm trying to explain is that oftentimes they really do kind of go together. They're kind of like the PB&J, because the anxiety can be so high, you just don't want to go out. You are anxious about a test. You're anxious about, did your friends talk about you? Are they talking bad about you? Did you do something wrong? Are you going to screw up this relationship? I should probably, you know, you get so overstimulated by all these thoughts, that you start to kind of feel like, I can't do anything. I don't want to go out because I'll make a fool of myself, or I'm not going to go on that date. I'm not going to respond to this person. And you really start to kind of limit your interactions with others. You limit your ability to do things. And so that can then lead to depression, where you just feel so, again, that kind of ball and chain is so stuck and feel like maybe no one will understand because it sounds like I'm crazy. I know that was kind of me in that position. Like, I'm just like, my husband would always ask me, like, why are you anxious? I said, because I can't explain it to you. There's just so much that I'm anxious about that I have to like shut down my body. And it's taken me a long time to really work through that and understand it. And so for our kids who maybe don't have those coping skills, that is where we need to come in and step up and say, hey, let me help you. This is what I'm seeing. And maybe that way we can address it with the kids, because we know the kids are coming in with some, therapeutic needs, or they've experienced trauma. They've seen things, that no kiddos should. And so we know there's a lot going on there. And so it's kind of there for us to help unpack that. And it does take time and it does take patience. And if a child is going through this, we just want to make sure we're supporting them and encouraging them to, attend counseling or to participate, to share what they feel comfortable sharing, or journal, and utilizing those coping skills to assist with this. So some additional tips are: reassure the child that anxiety can also serve a protective emotion. So anxiety is there to kind of say, hey, hold up, rethink this, or maybe take your time with this. When we're talking about, if we're feeling anxious about going on a date, and, we want to make sure that, that's, again, some of this is normal. Is that worry that's normal? Maybe the anxiety is there to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't trust this person. It's kind of my gut feeling sometimes. Keep an open dialogue. Just talk to the kid. Hey, I understand. I've gone through this too. I've experienced this. Use active listening skills. That is so important. I tell my son, I could see he's having a bad day. And I said, hey, I'm not going to force a conversation on you, but it just seems like you're pretty upset right now. I'm always here, if you want to talk. Prepare for difficult situations. Sometimes this is building up to, maybe a child's disclosing something, or maybe they really need to talk about what has happened to them in their home, or what they're feeling in the moment. And so we want to make sure that we're prepared to know, like, this could get to a deeper conversation here. And that would be something that also you might want to share with your caseworker. Highlight child strengths. We've got a lot of anxiety. We're pretty anxious about something, but look at all the good you're doing. You are working through it. You're trying your best in school. And, that's all we can really ask for, is that you try, or you make an attempt to get out there, try something new. Highlight that child's strengths, because that's definitely going to play a role in building that child's self-esteem back up. And being aware of your own expectations. If you know this child already has these anxious tendencies, and you're expecting them to just kind of go out there and put their heart out into something, or, ace every test they've got, you need to check yourself. We have to be aware that kids that are struggling, that are coming into our homes, are going to have some anxiety. And they may struggle in school. They may not have those A's and B's. They may just be passing. But sometimes that's what they can do in that moment. And so we have to kind of meet them where they're at. So when do we seek treatment? If you do not see sufficient improvement in your child or teen's anxiety, it may be time to seek additional support from a professional counselor or therapist. I've seen several cases where they were doing pretty well, and then it was getting to the point where there was some questionable behavior, whether it was talking about self-harming or just complete isolation. And you're not seeing much improvement with your own conversations with that child or their, counseling at school. So we want to reach out to a little bit more, putting more services in, putting more resources in. Sometimes the kids just doesn't want to talk to us, but maybe they'll find someone that they really connect with that could be a good mentor. And kind of going back to the seeking treatment is that sometimes there is the need for a medication, but we always want to try the counseling and building the coping skills toolbox first before we want to get into medication, because that's really important, because medication only plays a partial role in it to kind of help the chemical imbalance. But we really want to make sure we're putting in place those tools. So these were the resources that I used. The Parent's Guide to Anxiety was really a great tool. Then I found a few articles, and here's a few books that are kid friendly. They were kind of on the top list of, when a child's dealing with anxiety. So I can always send it to you if you're interested. But that's what I've got so far. Anyone have any questions or comments? No? Okay.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that everything you said is very beneficial in my life right now, between a kid with a RAD and another one that's suffering anxiety, like melting down the bathroom walls. And I did use some of those techniques, like box breathing, meditative videos to help. But ultimately, we did have to put him back on Zoloft, sadly, to get him through, because it was just overwhelming. But, and these are my adopted kids that I've had since 2004 or 2014 that are still struggling, in the system and with different things that are going on. And another child is RAD, who just yesterday someone stepped on her shoe and instead of, responding appropriately, kicked her. And it's because of the anxiety. And once we did talk about it, we did find out. So a lot of what you're saying is really impacting what's going on in my life right now. And I just think it was very pertinent, and I'm glad that you presented it. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's just so, it is common to have those worries, but I think it's even more common for the kiddos that we interact with daily to have that anxiety, and just to kind of understand what it looks like and how they might react to things. I was really fortunate that I was able to have a conversation with my mom when she started noticing me struggle, and I was able to get the right help. And so even as an adult today, I still have my anxiety, and that does have my depression involved. But what I found is I know I can recognize it. I've built up my coping skills. I understand the signs and the symptoms. And so we want to do the same thing for our kids. We want them to know, what are the signs? When, if I'm struggling here, can I reach out to somebody? Who's my safe person? And I think it's just really important to have that discussion in the conversations. So with that, I'm going to end our